Luma and the Greenhouse of Winter Rain. Luma reached the old conservatory at the edge of the park as winter rain began to write its soft cursive across the glass, and the footpath carried a fine sheen that turned each step into a quiet footprint of light. The building rose like a patient thought, with many panes and curved ribs, and the door handles were round and smooth from years of grateful hands. When she pressed one open, a tide of warm humidity greeted her with the scent of soil and leaf and citrus peel, and her whiskers caught tiny beads that felt like a welcome from the air itself. A caretaker in a blue apron nodded with a kindness that made words optional and said, "Feel free to wander and let the plants arrange your pace, for they know about pacing better than clocks do." Inside, paths of red tile wandered between beds of ferns and palms and small trees that had learned the language of glass-filtered daylight. Drips from the roof found their way into leaves with the accuracy of experience, and the leaves answered with a sound like polite applause. A sign near the entrance invited visitors to touch a single leaf from the velvet fig and then hold their breath for a count of 4 and then release it for a count of 6. A practice that the greenhouse recommended for all who wished to carry the rain within them. Luma followed the suggestion and felt the warm air settle deeper in her chest, and the tiles accepted her slower pace as if they had anticipated it all morning. To the left, a pool with dark water kept the reflection of the roof like a memory it would never misplace, and Koi moved under that memory with the calm certainty of seasoned readers. A small bench beside the pool held a wooden bowl of smooth pebbles with a card that read, "Choose one to carry and return it when your thoughts have finished their walk," and she selected a pebble the color of smoke. The pebble felt balanced in her paw, neither demanding attention nor withdrawing it, and this balance taught her body to agree. She watched the koi write silver sentences along the surface without disturbing the punctuation of raindrops. The conservatory divided itself politely into rooms of weather. In the citrus room, small suns hung from branches, each fruit wearing a thin polish of mist, and their leaves were greener than promises. A gardener explained that the trees prefer conversation more than music, so the staff reads to them from books about weather, recipes, and travel. The gardener turned a page and the citrus inhaled. Luma listened and found that the page turning had the same rhythm as rain seeking the seam of a pane. In the fern court, the ceiling dipped lower and the air cooled to a texture that reminded her of walking beside a riverbank at dusk. Fronds lifted and unrolled with the measured confidence of friendly animals waking from easy naps. A sign explained how ferns carry memory in spirals and that unspooling is their way of introducing themselves to light. Luma placed her paw near a fiddlehead without touching it and felt a calm that did not require proof. Farther on, she discovered the dry room, a small chamber where sand and stones protected desert cousins from the rain outside, and yet even here the caretakers had prepared a bowl of fog that visited for 1 minute each hour so that every plant could taste a little winter. Spines winked with tiny pearls when the minute arrived and then settled back to their usual stillness. A child placed a finger near a shy cactus blossom and withdrew it with respectful speed when the blossom made its small request for space. Luma approved of the child and the blossom both. The palm gallery rose higher, and the ribs of the roof met like fingers folded in thought. A narrow stair led to a catwalk that circled the interior, and she stepped onto it and looked down upon the rooms as if reading an open book where the chapters were climates and the paragraphs were beds of soil. Beneath her, staff rolled wide watering cans on little wheels and paused as often as they moved, listening with their eyes, measuring with their hands on leaves, working with a pace that made time honest. The rain drummed on the roof in quiet bands like distant surf, and the glass turned each note into a kindness. She descended into the orchid walk where flowers balanced themselves like patient birds. The air here was fragrant in the way a gentle memory is fragrant, soft and truthful. A docent spoke softly about roots that prefer to hang and drink from the air, and about the shy delight these plants feel when a visitor speaks a simple sentence slowly. Luma said, "I am happy to be here," and the petals arranged themselves into the faint suggestion of a smile that may have always been there. The rain continued and the conservatory grew brighter rather than darker, as if the world had decided to place all the light inside. A glass door led to the potting court where the floor wore a polite coat of soil, and trays held seedlings that seemed to dream themselves taller. A volunteer invited Luma to place a paw on the warm surface of a heating mat and feel the comfort that roots feel when the ground remembers summer, and she did and learned that warmth can be a hopeful map. On a chalkboard someone had written a list of good words to speak to seeds, words like rest and enough and soon together. Beyond the potting court a corridor opened to the herbarium, and the scent changed as if the alphabet of the room had shifted from vowels to consonants. Here the air held rosemary and thyme and bay and mint, and glass drawers kept pressed leaves like letters from thoughtful friends. A curator showed her a sheet where a collection of sage leaves lay in neat rows and said some plants look like writing even before they become writing, and Luma believed this while reading the quiet pattern with her nose. At a table a woman stitched labels with tiny script onto muslin, and her needle moved like a silver fish. On the far side she found the misting hall, a narrow room where fine spray rose from hidden heads and turned into a soft fog that walked the length of the hall twice every hour. Benches lined the wall for those who wished to be visited by the fog. Luma sat and let the droplets settle in her fur, and she imagined they were bringing news from parts of the greenhouse she had not yet seen. Someone coughed gently, and the fog seemed to place one hand on that cough and say, "I hear you," and the cough relaxed. A bell chimed from somewhere near the roof with the politeness of a spoon against porcelain. Visitors drifted toward the tea terrace, an interior balcony with a long table where steam made small flags above cups. The caretaker in the blue apron poured barley tea and placed lemon slices in a glass bowl so that they could glow like mild moons. She drank and learned that the tea belonged to the same family as rain, and that family keeps good company with breath. At the center of the conservatory, a circle of stones surrounded a tree with smooth bark the color of milk tea, and from its branches hung many glass bottles, each with a tiny paper inside. A sign read "Correspondence Tree." Visitors may write a thought for the plants or for the rain or for anyone who will one day carry a garden in their heart. Luma wrote "Thank you" for the practice of patience and rolled the paper and slipped it into a bottle that already held a soft glow from all the gratitude it had collected. Through a small door she entered the night room, kept hidden for plants that prefer shade, and along the floor little lanterns guided feet like low stars that had learned humility. Moss made a gentle carpet where no one stepped, and on that carpet the silver trail of a snail mapped a story without letters. The story began at a puddle and ended at a leaf, and no one asked for more. She listened to the room and heard the rest had only deep shade can speak. Near the night room a sign pointed to the seed library, and within it rows of jars looked out with clear eyes. Labels gave names and histories and the voices of people who had saved seeds across seasons. A volunteer taught a small class on how to fold paper envelopes that loved to be opened, and Luma folded one and wrote on it the name of a bin with a friendly curve. She returned the empty envelope to the box of practice and felt proud about a small thing done well. Afternoon settled without pressure. The rain did the useful work of kindness on the roof, while inside a harp near the palm gallery offered light notes that glided like swifts. The musician rested her cheek against the wood after a phrase and allowed the chord to finish on its own, and in that pause the greenhouse felt taller. Luma watched a drop form at the peak of a pane and release itself and begin a slow path toward the gutter, guided by the faintest tilt of glass, and she admired the courage of that small journey. She found a bench beside a wall of climbing jasmine and noticed a booklet on the seat. It was a visitor's book trimmed with cloth, and inside were lines that were not signatures but brief promises. "I will water my neighbor's plants when they travel. I will leave fallen leaves on the soil where they can become food. I will rest when it is raining and practice when it is not." Luma added, "I will listen to the plant first and then to my plan," and she closed the book and the cloth cover held her sentence gently. Later the caretaker invited anyone who wished to learn the practice of the 4 temperatures of rain. They moved to the central aisle and stood spaced like notes on a staff. The caretaker said that rain wears 4 coats in this house: warm, cool, bright, and dim, and that each coat teaches a different breath, and that today the warm and the dim would be visiting. On a signal, valves opened somewhere above, and fine threads of warm rain stitched the air without touching skin, and everyone imagined those threads passing through the lungs like kindness. After a pause, the dim arrived, which is a whisper of moisture that teaches stillness, and the room leaned into that lesson without moving. She returned to the pool and gave the pebble back to the wooden bowl. The koi approached as if to read her thoughts and then turned away when they had read enough, which is excellent manners. The reflection of the roof had become a gentle patchwork of evening light, and the rain seemed to speak in longer sentences now, as if telling a story that had waited all day to be told at this particular hour. Luma listened without interrupting. In the south wing, an installation called Weather Letters invited visitors to ring a small bell and receive a slip of paper from a chute hidden in a column. Each slip offered one instruction for ordinary days. Her slip said, "Look at the ground beneath a hedge and thank the shade for its work." She walked to a hedge and did exactly that, and discovered many little lives arranging themselves in calm industry. The ground replied with a pleasant silence that she carried like a folded note. Near closing time, the staff dimmed lights in a careful sequence that moved like a lullaby through the building. One by one the rooms finished their sentences and placed periods at the ends. Visitors gathered their scarves and last sips and looked once more at leaves that had introduced themselves so graciously. Luma stood under the palm ribs and felt the whole structure breathe, glass and iron and plant and rain drawing a single shared breath that arrived at peace and stayed there. When she stepped outside, the winter park felt newly kind. Puddles had become calm lakes for small skies, and the path she had walked now offered itself again, darker and softer and even more honest. The rain had slowed, but it had not left, it had simply found its evening pace. She paused beside a bed of sleeping roses and thanked them for being patient through cold days, and the roses seemed to answer by holding their shape as carefully as ever. She crossed the park and reached a footbridge over a stream, and the stream kept the greenhouse in its voice, a deeper quiet within the flowing. Lamps along the railing wore halos, and the air between halos taught her the distance between moments, which was a gentle lesson. A tram passed beyond the trees with a sound like a cat thinking about purring, and then the sound was gone, and the rain wrote another paragraph. At home she opened the window and the evening reached in like a friend who brings soup. On her table she placed a small bowl of water, a sprig of mint from the herbarium shop, and the empty practice envelope she had folded earlier. She wrote 3 words on a scrap of paper: rain, breath, leaf, and set the words beside the mint so they could borrow its fragrance for the night. A little kettle murmured and she poured hot water over grains of roasted barley and let the steam find the corners of the room. As she lay down she felt the glass house continue inside her, rooms of weather arranged with good manners, the tea terrace and the potting court and the pool, the correspondence tree with its light bottles, the seed library with its jars like thoughtful eyes. Her breath walked those rooms with unhurried steps. Each inhale visited a leaf and each exhale placed a pebble back in its bowl. Rain on the roof translated everything into a language that the body remembers without study. Sleep arrived not as a curtain but as a greenhouse keeper who knows where the blankets are kept and how to tuck them so shoulders are free. The keeper turned off the lamps gently in the order the conservatory had used and smiled at the sound of quiet water in the pool, and the koi settled at the slow depth near the lilies. The roof ribs relaxed and glass held the rain without believing it had to be anything else. and in that soft accord Luma felt her thoughts climb down from their ladders and fold themselves like leaves ready for night. She allowed the memory of warm air and clear pains to hover under her ribs, and she let each breath arrive like a visitor who already knows the house. She pictured the pebble bowl and the koi-like silver commas and the envelopes ready to be filled, and she felt a quilt of green thoughts settle across her as softly as mist finding a leaf. She promised to return when the rain wished to practice again and to bring a sentence for the bottles, and the promise glowed with the mild light that good promises keep.